Welcome back to the Coffin Lounge podcast. I am your host, Vampire Kitten, and I am here with Buck Agrios, who is actually, you are in the future.
I am.
Yeah. I'm a day behind you. Welcome. So where are you? Where are you currently situated in the world?
So right now I'm in Melbourne, Australia. So this is my home base. I travel around a lot, so I do pop up in various time zones, but this is my main home base. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So I'm glad to have you on the show. I've actually been wanting to talk to you for a while. You do so many cool things in the Australia area. I hope that's the is that a good generalization?
Yeah. Yep. That'll do.
So you have House. You are a contributor to magazines. You do a vampire ball every year.
Yeah.
So you have a lot going on. You wanna how did you get started in all of this?
Oh,
I know that's a really big broad question.
that's a big one. How did what in community or in events or?
I guess kind of both. I feel like events always lead to community. So like how about when you really decided you wanted to go out and like do big like the vampire ball. Let's start there.
Okay. Yeah.
When you decided to go out and do the vampire ball, what just how long has it been since you started that, and what made you go, I need to do this for the community?
Yeah, cool. So it's fairly recent. The Vampire Ball, we're coming up to our second ball. So, it's an annual ball, but we've only done one so far, with a second one coming up on the 11th of April. I think a moment of madness made me go, hey, I can do this. Anyone who's put on events knows exactly the stress and the panic and the late nights and early mornings that go into it. But it's for the community and very much authentically about community and for community. We've got a bit of a trend at the moment where there's lots of balls popping up. Everyone who can play a soundtrack and some flashing lights is running a ball these days. So we've got an interesting take on it. But my Vampire Ball is about community. It's not a commercial-driven event. And it was driven by a want and a need and a way to share and celebrate our culture and our vampire community here in Australia. We're a small community, but
I was just about to ask how large it was.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of us out there, but there's also Australia's a massive, massive land. It's huge, and like our land space of Australia is pretty much the size of the United States, essentially. Right. But our population is 25 million people. So it's not a lot of people, and we're spread out. And also just the innate culture in Australia is often very private. We don't get involved in each other's business. We sort of let each other be. It's a little bit of that ex-convict mentality kind of that comes through in part of Australia's iconic culture. So yeah, we're spread out and we approach things very cautiously and we keep very private. So to have a ball and go, hey, we're living vampire community and real vampire community, come along. It was a big thing to sort of do, and it's working. It's the first ball sold out, and it was a wonderful success.
What's your attendance? What was your attendance for the first one?
It's a small event, so 200 people.
Oh, that's yeah, I've seen so much of your it's Carpe Noctem, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So I've seen so many advertisements because that's what I get them all the time because vampire stuff. So I see them all the time, and I'm like, this looks so much bigger than now that you've told me it's only 200 people. I'm like, that's pretty. You guys have you got your marketing is amazing, and I thought it was much bigger than that. Like, to be honest with you.
Look, hopefully it will get that way. I come from a background of the arts and theatre, and I've been producing shows and so forth for a long, long time in my life. So I approach these kind of things with the same mentality. So approach cautiously, start small, and really listen to what people are asking for, and engage the community to be part of it, and then it will grow with that. And we've already seen a part of that happen. The idea of the ball initially was to be a little bit of that beacon, that, you know, come out wherever you are moment. And it worked. It's been wonderful. So I have had a number of people reach out in various ways from community, and some brand new to community, some that have been around a long, long time and lurk in the shadows, as many of us do for a lot of our time in community. So yeah, the idea of the ball, because it heads into our darker season. So it is just at the beginning, leading into Samhain in the Wheel of the Year concept, or heading into autumn. So it's the beginning of the death season here. And the idea of the ball is to kind of act as the psychopomp, to open the gateway to head into that darker season, to start to explore that journey and that underworld journey. So the ball itself also has a ritual aspect to it as well, which is exactly about that. It's about doing a symbolic sacrifice to open up that energy in the gateway. And also for us, it's a way to feed the vampire current itself and drive that energy to that very current that connects us all.
Right. That's fantastic. I love that. So speaking of like rituals and things, you are a witch as well. So how long have you been involved? Like, are you eclectic? Like, what's your path? Like, what do you kind of do, and how long have you been involved in that?
Yeah, so witchcraft, like vampire stuff, it's sort of hard to really pin at one's really part of how long were you in community and when did you awaken versus so I've been exploring witchcraft on various levels. I was a haunted little child, but as far as like actively learning and practicing, since my sort of early 20s, so late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay. Honestly, you know what? Now that you've mentioned awakening, we haven't actually discussed that on this show at all.
Okay.
So you've actually touched on something that, like, I usually talk to a lot of members of the vampire community on here, that we just kind of talk about what they're doing and everything, but like we don't talk about the details of like what vampirism is. So I think that you bringing up awakening is a really good segue to a conversation. So
I'm gonna
so typically, for those who are listening that don't know anything about the vampire community or that sort of culture, is that when vampires are younger, or people that identify with vampirism as a whole, they go through a quote-unquote awakening. That's like what it's called. And essentially that's when they sort of realize that this is the lifestyle, the path, the spirituality, what have you, depending on how you feel about vampirism, because there's lots and lots and lots of paths and directions that it goes, that's kind of where they start. They've awakened now, and they want to learn about how feeding works and all the other little bits and bobs that come with it. Hopefully that was I don't know if that was a good definition. It's such a it's a broad term for a lot of...
It is a broad term, and it's so individual for people, and some people have multiple versions of it because or multiple processes of it, because even though you awaken, sometimes, you know, some of us choose to go back asleep or shy away, or for various reasons, whether it be pressures of dayside life or running into aspects of community that weren't quite what you expected or weren't reflecting you, and then shadow work, a lot of self-reflection and self-doubt, and there's so much to be done after you awaken, and not everyone is ready for that. So sometimes they just kind of push it away and it's kind of what we say, going back into the coffin or falling back asleep, and then they come back and reawaken in a different time. But yeah, awakening happens for people at various times of their life for various reasons. It is the vampire puberty in a way.
Essentially.
Yeah, because it's never pretty and quick.
I sort of feel like it's where you like the base of it is where you start looking into the community and seeing what's out there. And that's why I think it's really exciting, kind of circling back to your vampire ball. That's really exciting for your area because it doesn't sound like it's something that has happened there before. Have you had other events?
No, not. There's been sort of vampire themed balls necessarily, which are a bit more just a Halloween costume kind of event, but not a community created event like this. Not where I am. So yeah, it's been wonderful because we really have had some people who have been newly awakened who have come to the ball and actually found that connection of community. And one in particular was really special to me because this young vampire, straight away across the room, I could see that there was something going on with them. That current that you feel, right. And that of the blood resonance. And they approached me and nervously talked about, real vampires. So you're real vampires, aren't you? And we had that discussion. It's like, oh yeah, you're not alone. It's okay. And that made it all worth it. That made the whole pressure, the late nights, the stress of putting on an event, all worth it because someone had what I didn't have. And I came into the vampire community in the mid-late 90s. So 96, 97 is when I was awakening as such. So I was about 17 at that time. And yeah, I didn't have a lot of community. And here in Australia, obviously I've already talked about we're quite sparse, but this was when I was awakening. It was the beginning of the internet was fairly new back then. So
honestly, we had back in the day, there are a lot of resources that are not around anymore. Like Sanguinarius is gone.
Yeah, Sanguinarius, Sphinx Cat.
We
Drink
had
Deeply and Dream. All of those.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that one.
I'm a wayback machine of this stuff in my own head.
There was Vampire Church, and the temple, the Vampire Temple is still
Temple of the Vampire
or Temple of the Vampire, still the same website.
I know,
still the same stuff. Like, are they still around, or is it just like a forever website? Like, is somebody just still paying for it?
People still pay membership for it, and they have produced more books, expansions upon the Vampire Bible.
I saw it like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, wow, nothing has changed on this website at all.
The rest of the site looks exactly the same. Yeah, it's great.
It's kind of wild going back and looking at that. I was like, everybody else is gone, but this is a pillar that has remained. So I saw that you have a house as well.
Yeah.
When did you start that?
So the house started just before the ball, essentially. So the year before the ball. So the house opened in what year are we now? I forget time.
2025. So
23. 23 was when the house officially opened. Yeah. Okay. So, and that came from, we had a bit of in-person community that was coming together here in Melbourne, and because I was doing a fair bit of online virtual world stuff during lockdown, and I was involved with some of Father Sebastian's events that he was doing virtually, and I also was running other sort of nightclub events virtually, running the Vampire Lounge as a virtual Vampire Lounge as part of a virtual nightclub as well. And because of that, local communities started to realize, oh, there's someone here I can speak to, connect with. Yeah. And then it was asked, would you open a house? And I was very reluctant for that because I've been very independent my whole vampire life, and what I'd witnessed from the outside of vampire community and vampire politics over the decades has definitely made me go, you know what, I do not need that in my life. I've also been very involved in witchcraft community and being in a role of leader or facilitator for different groups and committees and things like that. So the idea of taking on a role of leadership.
Yeah.
But also I wasn't sure if it was what was needed of me, and I'm very, very careful to make sure that, is this something my ego is asking of me, or is this something that's authentically needed and not necessarily about me? Right. And until I can answer that honestly, I sit with it, and the house really came together organically, and the naming of it was a process as well, which because it's the House of Agrios, and someone who is here going, well, it's not all about me, but I'm naming the house after me was a struggle, but the name itself connects to a magical world, and it's connected to Dionysus Zagreus, a god, and this epithet itself refers to, well, it means of the wild. Right. So it is of the untamed, of the unbound, and of the wilderness and of the wild itself. So I thought, if I'm going to name a house something, I love the idea of that, because it allows the freedom of the structure of our house. It's not a tight structure of outer court, inner court kind of structure. It's that we do have some elders in the house, just basically to make sure that there's other people who have been in community as long as I have, or thereabouts, but from different perspectives, to make sure that it's not just my voice that's being heard on things, but making sure any members of the house have multiple people they can turn to with different viewpoints and different experiences. So that's how I'm making sure it's not about me.
That's great.
Now, outside of that, there are other vampires or people that are just going through awakening or finding their feet, finding their way. And I do have a number of people who connect with me, and I spend time chatting to them. I offer my time and support as far as providing ideas of what they could read, areas they could connect with, community they could find online as well, and letting them sort of start to feel their way and get to know them. And if over time it's right that they then join the house or be invited to the house, they are. But my dayside world, I do a lot of training. I've been a trainer for a long, long time, and I write training materials and so forth. And then in my magical world, I've been trained as an initiator and a teacher of a witchcraft tradition that I'm in, and I facilitated events and community for a long time. So teaching and mentorship, I guess I should say, is something that's really important for me. Again, it's that, what didn't I have that I wish I had? And the way I facilitate the mentorship is really a freedom of exploration, where I can just simply be a sounding board and making sure that they're not doing anything too extreme or too crazy, but go explore the things and read the things that I don't necessarily agree with what's being written, but it's good to read them. It's good to know what you don't know. And yeah.
Some resources I'm just like, what am I reading? But I mean, like I'd rather read it and have that knowledge and go, that's maybe not something I think is great, and understand that that's something I maybe don't think is great, versus like other resources where I'm like, okay, this person actually looks like they're part of the community and want to express new ideas, and I think that's great. So yeah, I think reading everything is probably really important. So I love that you are putting yourself out there like that. Have you ever I know you are putting yourself out there a lot. And I was wondering, does your night side and day side like ever overlap? Do you ever have moments where people like recognize you from like, they're like, I think I've seen this guy before somewhere, don't know where, but probably at the ball or something.
Well, look, if they're at the ball, then what were they doing there?
Right.
And that's fine. And if they find me, then what were you looking for? You found me. Yep, my day side world and my night side, they're not separate. I really do live very authentically. Having said that, my daytime job is nothing to do with this, but my daytime job allows me to travel the world and have incredible experiences and experiences in a lifestyle that is not mine. So I'm very grateful for it, and I have to be certain level of care around it. But also, I've been doing it for a long time, so I'm comfortable with if anyone was to approach me and go, "Oh, hey, what's this vampire thing you're on about?" It's like, we can chat about it if you want, but you get to a point. Well, I found that I could get to a point where it's a little bit of, I have to be true to me. And, I'm in my mid-40s now, and I'm comfortable with who I am. So being authentic is very, very important to me. And trying to find ways to do that safely in my daytime life is important.
That's great. So I'm also looking at, aside from your work in the vampire community, you also brought the queer male pagan community together.
Well, I was involved in doing that. I didn't single-handedly awaken the queer witches.
Sorry.
But
I mean, like, well, you started bringing people together, or you were involved in it.
Yeah.
How did you get started with that? Because that's actually really interesting. A lot of people don't realize that witches can be anybody, anything, any gender, anything. And a lot of people have this like stereotype that witches are all women, and that's not really a thing. It's like witches are everybody, from all sides and spectrums and life, walks of life. So how did you get involved in that community?
Same process of how I got publicly involved in vampire community. Was the witchcraft community was just part of me and part of my spiritual practice as pagan and a witch. And I started to find a need and a gap and answers that I wasn't getting for me as a gay male witch. And a lot of that came down to looking at what was being offered in that space in community. This was a period of time when we were off the back of the 90s movement of witchcraft revival, which we saw the birth of Wicca kind of stuff. Right. So it was really packaged for the masses, and let's brush away anything that looks too spooky off of it, and let's try and hyper heteronormify this kind of stuff and goddess kind of structure. And with that, the queerness of witchcraft was wiped out completely, almost completely. So to try and find where that queer sits and where there was representation of the divine that reflects ourselves as queer community was really important to me. So I started to build online space and then in-person space, and it grew. Queer Pagan Men Australia, we had regular meetups that were in 3 different states of Australia, so one whole side of the country essentially in the capital cities, and that was regular. And we had regular big group gatherings and a big group ritual and things like that. So it was really special, and it was wonderful to help people find that reflection of divinity in themselves as queer, and unpack some of the bullshit heteronormative rubbish that was really being overlaid, and start to explore things beyond binary approaches to witchcraft.
Right.
So it was a very rewarding part of my personal life and spiritual world, and professionally as well. After 9 years, I stepped away. I had built up and done a lot, and I was also going through a process of, I had been initiated into a tradition for men who love men as well, which was an American-based tradition. So I was part of bringing that tradition to Australia. I was the first to be initiated outside of the United States in that tradition. And I was becoming an initiator and a teacher in that. So I needed to refocus my energies for that. And also, through that whole process, the fangs kept tapping at me as far as the vampire aspect of myself that I had kept very secret through this whole period of time was really coming to the forefront. And it was becoming harder and harder to not answer the call of what was coming. And there was certain moments through various rituals, and also in my own initiation, where multiple brothers of the tradition I was initiated in did a reading to help find my initiation name, and even that had very clear reference to my vampire self, and they knew nothing about my vampire self outside of, I've got permanent fangs, so of course that has a little hint, but still, there was too many signs that kept on coming back to, well, if you want to know the truth of what's there at the core of you, you sort of kept it quiet. and yeah, because I awakened quite young, and my community was mostly online, and then a little bit in person. And in the early 2000s, anyone who was around online in community then saw the flame wars and the shit show that it really became. And a lot of us just kind of went, you know what, I'm not here to fuck spiders. I'm here to just get in and be real. So I don't need this in my life. And yeah, focused on other stuff. And then slowly, through my pagan world and witchcraft world, it brought me back. So yeah.
That's good. Yes, I remember those message boards and the community. And I feel like at some point, a lot of people just took a step back because it was so toxic, and so there was no structure of how a community should run. People didn't know how to talk to each other on the internet yet. I mean, they still don't know how to talk to each other on the internet, really, really, realistically. But you know, I always feel like looking back at doing this podcast has made me reflect on that time. And I feel like I did my time in that community aspect to the point where I'm like, okay, I have other things that I want to do. I really want to be involved. I really want to just kind of keep an eye on things. But like at some point I took a big step back myself because it was just so much politicking and drama, and there were like literal crazy people out there like hurting other people. Like it was wild. I was like, I don't need to be involved in any of this. So I also personally took a step back. But I think what the vampire community is looking at it now, there are a lot of good eggs. There's a couple bad eggs in that basket, but there's a lot of good ones these days. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they're trying really hard to like literally like resurrect the community in a way that is positive, in a way that is filled with understanding and love, and not I'm trying to tread lightly here, because I know the people that listen to my podcast are like, I remember that, and so I have to tread lightly here with how I say this, but it was not great. And I'm glad to see that things are gotten. have gotten better. I will say I do have run-ins periodically with people who I didn't agree with back in the day, and they still have not changed. And I think that's really unfortunate. I don't know if you ever have those kind of interactions with people.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm just like, aren't you tired? Like, aren't you tired of being mean and rude to other people and thinking you know what's best for everyone else? Like, but then I have
the one
people...
true wayism of it all. Yeah.
Yes, and that's really... it's just hurting the community overall. And what you and some others that I've had on the show have been doing is what's needed. Like, I personally think it's what's needed, because there's guidance there's love, there's community. And before we started the show, you had actually mentioned that you do a combination of public and private teaching ritual stuff. I kind of want to touch on that. How does the general public, like, okay, so obviously you do your private rituals with your house or with your coven. I don't know what your grouping is called for your witches, but you obviously do the like sabbats and all those things. When you do public type stuff, how is it received, and how do people come and talk to you? What kind of questions do they ask, sort of, is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, what does the general public think of the things that you do for them?
Yeah. Look, when it comes to ritual work and so forth, a lot of that is in witchcraft community. That my history of that, and especially doing anything public, and public, it's all very set up to be a safe, inclusive space, that nothing's too challenging, nothing's too overwhelming, and we dial down, or we do in silent, the stuff that we don't necessarily want seen. So it's just coordinated a certain way. Most of my ritual stuff that's been in group has either been through either witch camps, through like reclaiming witchcraft camp community. Really cool. I'm initiated in the Unnamed Path, and that's a path for men who love men, and they have regular sort of witch camps, essentially, in the States. So I've been part of doing rituals there. But yeah, because I have been public in that space, and yeah, you'll have people just walk on by and stop and listen, and then want to have a chat, and I'm open for that. I'm you develop a pretty quick bullshit meter and also a good survival instinct. So you measure as you go. I don't do as much of that anymore. My focus is bringing my own personal practice and what I've discovered, particularly in the overlay of magic in vampire community and how I engage in vampire community. I've been sharing some of that through, I've done workshops, written my own materials around that. And I also write for one of the magazines I write for, which is Horns Magazine. It's an erotic occult magazine. It's an American magazine, and I'm a regular contributor. And I write on my journey as vampire, but in a magical perspective. And I share in that a lot of my more ecstatic approaches to the vampire energetic work and to the witchcraft practice, I guess, or the magical practice. When you read a lot of magical works for vampires, a lot of it's very bound in traditional sort of left-hand path, levee kind of structure, or high magic kind of structure, and it's not my bag. It's not my shtick.
So, have you thought about writing, like, a book? Like, publishing your own stuff? Or is that not...
Yeah. I can definitely see it in my future. I really want to make sure that what I do is well practiced outside of myself. And so the stages that I'm working with a lot of this is through workshops, through mentorships, people that are interested in particularly exploring certain techniques. So yeah, I know there's a huge gap particularly in this approach to how we engage with that spiritual, magical aspect of vampire.
Right.
Like, and the same sort of thing with witchcraft. I myself, a lot of Wicca is often the Mick Wicca. I have respect for lineage-based, like Gardnerianism or Alexandrian witchcraft and lineage proper structured Wicca. It's not for me, but I have respect for that. But a lot of Wicca that we see is really just eclectic, watered down commercial mishmash, and that was never for me. And also when it comes to vampire, a lot of our books are just bound in a lot of Satanism, and a lot of it's just written by middle-aged white men with neckbeards that really need to get out of the basement. So I don't have time for that. I like magic that has proven results. It needs to be something that has an effect outside of yourself. It can't just live in your head. It can't just be empty, hollow words and some pretty sigils. And even like a lot of my background is ecstatic practice and embodied practice and altered states, not necessarily drug taking or hallucinogenic, just through body work and breath work and things like that. So shamanic influenced technique in some of the approaches, a lot of different blended techniques. But there's a lot of foundations in teaching that come from areas like the reclaiming witchcraft or Anderson fairy witchcraft, which has been really, really influential. I do a lot of ancestral stuff as well. So the tradition I'm initiated in, the founder of this tradition, his background is both from Wiccan witchcraft structure, but a lot of druidry, and also was initiated and very influenced by a lot of Santeria. So a lot of Afro-Caribbean traditions, which is very ancestral focused. So a lot of foundational teachings that I got through areas of altered states, through journey work, through shamanic journey work and things like that, have all the vampire current has found its way through each of those to me. And that's where I'm realizing, hold on, it's so strong here. Why isn't this out there? Like, why doesn't that exist out there? So I have been writing some bits and pieces. And as I said, I've written a few bits for Horns Magazine. I've run some workshops around the structures that I've put together, and we'll build it and see how it goes. But I'm excited by the work that I'm doing, but also excited to see what other people are doing out there as well. That's of a similar, not just chaos stuff necessarily. I have a great space for good, clever chaos magic work in vampirism. But I just find a lot of the overlay of the heavy Satan left-hand path, Leviathan and high magic stuff just ain't my kick. And look, I'm good friends with people who write some of this. Father Sebastian and I have got a friendship that goes a way back, and I have a wonderful respect for a lot of work that he's done and a lot of what he's written, and as what he's offered in community has been very important. Do I agree with everything? Fuck no. And we have wonderful debates and all of that. But that's what I appreciate, is that ability to share different points of view. And we don't have to agree with everything. We just have to be good people and stop and listen and consider and reflect and give it a go.
So I love that you mentioned that I don't necessarily agree with things. You know what's great about that? People don't necessarily have to agree with everything that's written out there. And I think that is a major point of contention in the modern vampire community, because somebody writes a book and then everybody thinks it's the end all be all of all books or something. And then they're like, well, you're right, you're wrong. There's a lot of gatekeeping of different things. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because everybody's path is so different, and everybody that learns about vampirism or awakens or whatever, joins the community in some way, shape, or form, I just want to lay it out there as well that you don't have to agree with what someone else has written. It's not the gospel. It's not the Bible. It's information for you to use in bits and pieces if you so wish. And I think that's a really important lesson here.
Yeah.
You know?
And to learn how to critically think with what you're reading, not just read and go, well, this must be how it is. But, if something's true for you, what makes it true? And if something is untrue or doesn't work for you, then why? And doing some honest reflection and re-exploring your self of identity. Sometimes we get this fear of going, oh, well, hold on. If I question that, does that thread pull the whole thing apart? It's like, no, you can unpick. It's okay. You can unpick your ideas, if your whole identity is so bound up in just one way of thinking, you've got bigger issues than a fucking book that someone's written, honestly. Right. So, doing some proper shadow work reflection, and even the idea of shadow work annoys me because it's so commercialized and taken away from a lot of what it is.
Oh my gosh.
But, we're exploring elements of shadow, particularly in vampire community. It is a big thing because often the vampire then gets used as an excuse to not do the work. Because go, oh, no, but, I'm a vampire, so I'm a predator. It's like, no, you're just highly toxic and problematic. Right. There's a difference. I find very much in vampire community, there's a big need for authentic shadow work to unpick and separate those elements that we excuse of our behaviors, of our reactionary responses that could be bound up in trauma, in multiple levels that tie and feed shadow identity. And we just put the vampire over the front of it to go, oh, well, but that's okay. It's the vampire. And no, it's not. You can be a very happy, healthy, positive living vampire that isn't all caught up in having to fight for everything or bark at everything. It's like, calm down. Maybe some therapy and some shadow work would help.
A little bit of little of a and B.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing, all of the community work that you've been doing. That's really great. It's hard to bring baby bats and elders and whatever else you want to call them together, because sometimes they butt heads, like they don't really want to share information, or, going back to what we kind of mentioned before, how toxic the community was for a really long time. I think we are growing out of that. I think there are bigger problems in the world, and us coming together is probably better than fighting, because we already have this niche little community, right? We're on our little island on the planet Earth, and a lot of people don't quite understand that island, and it's not for them anyway to understand. However, fighting, as much as everybody does sometimes, is not beneficial to the community as a whole. And I think the work that you were doing is very necessary. I think it's very noble to start something in a place that, no, just hear me out. It's very noble to start something in a place brand new, that the community, you don't really have a community. And I think that's amazing that you have done that, because now you're bringing together all these people who are like, oh, maybe I can come out of the shadows, and maybe I can participate in a greater community and be part of this thing. And I think that the way that you're going about it is responsible. And that, to me, is probably the best thing you can be. You're putting yourself out there in a really difficult manner, like in a really difficult setting. And I think that the work that you're doing is very, very cool. And
thank you.
I'm glad that people have a place that they can go to in your country, in your space, that because there's not really anything. I mean, we've got houses and things here. We're scattered. We're a mess. But, you know, we know we're a mess, and everybody's got their local communities, but nobody's really coming together on a more global scale. There was Voices of the Vampire Community for a little while. That is kind of not really around anymore. There's a couple of like Facebook network groups that I think are pretty solid. But there's not like a global vampire community where we can all be like, hey, this is the thing that we do, and we're all kind of part of the same culture and community. So I think it's super cool that you do that. Sorry. Yeah. I just had to tell you. I think it's very, no, and that's why I say it's noble, because you're doing something that hasn't been done before, and that's scary. Like, that is so scary.
Yeah. Oh, look, I've got to admit there are other vampire houses here in Australia. Again, we're very spread out, and I am careful to make sure that I'm offering what is relevant locally, because I don't feel confident building a community that is of service to someone that is, 10, 12-hour drive away from me, let alone the other side of the world. So it's, there are others doing it in their own way, and I'm always open to be of support of that. And I'm not trying to tread on anyone's toes or be, one true wayism about it. I'm just offering what I can for what is being asked here, and trying to listen to that and evolve and grow with that. And I think, one of the comments you made there about, the different ages and communities, some of us who went through those hard earlier days of it, I think that's also why there's a little bit of a gatekeeping for some of the elders, because there's that mentality of going, well, you don't know how hard I had to fight for this, so why should you just be handed it?
Uphill, backwards, through the snow, with rocks in their shoes.
But it doesn't mean the new generation should have to fight. What was that fighting for? It was so you didn't have to. And remembering that, I think, is important for certain elders in community to go, hey, calm down. They're not taking anything away from you. They might take that information and help it grow. They might throw it away, and it means nothing to them. It's not about you. Don't take it personally. Just offer and engage, and know that by sharing that with younger generations keeps your story alive in that, and keeps the origins and the truth from your perspective relevant as well. Even though in a new age things have changed, so certain ways have no place anymore, but knowing why those ways once had a place is important not to forget. So allowing space for that conversation to happen is so important, and remembering the art of listening and the art of true conversation and debate, where we can sit in comfortable space of different perspectives and not listening for what we don't agree with, but rather listening to what we don't know, honestly, and listening for what is new, or listening to what's inspiring or something that resonates. Right. Not just listening for that one thing, well, you're wrong. Because we get very stuck in that, and without getting political, we are in an environment that's affected globally for a period of time where true discourse is being lost in division, and it's us versus them, rather than, I know we're all one, having individual experiences that's a shared experience, so let's find out how we share. So pulling that into vampire community is important. And, there are others out there doing it. As you said, there is some other people, newer blood coming through, that's doing some incredible things in that space. And it's really wonderful.
So moving forward, what are your plans for the future? I mean, we've got the ball coming up.
Yep.
What do you have past that? Like we mentioned, or I mentioned that maybe books, maybe not publications, not sure about that. What do you want? What are you growing towards?
Yeah. Part of that I don't know. It's in a creative space at the moment, and something about the House of Agrios is that every member of the house is actually an artist in some form or another,
Interesting.
which is really exciting. We've just found each other, and every single member is in the arts in some form or another, which is amazing and creative and speaks to Of the Wild
Public
itself.
art pieces. Just saying,
Oh,
public
yeah,
art
yeah.
pieces. Like you could bring everybody together and everybody could work on public art pieces. Love that.
Well, that itself can be a ritual.
Right.
So, like
yeah.
our first vampire ball, we had a ritual offering, which was in a form of shibari, and they were then covered in fake blood that everyone was welcome to come and lick off of that body throughout the night. So that created a very interesting interactive art piece. We've got a different version happening this year, which is very exciting.
How did it taste? I have to know. How did it taste? Because you said fake blood. Was it candy? I got it. Now we've got to know. We have to know.
It's a basic old school recipe that it's not cinema worthy, but it's basically just strawberry syrup and chocolate syrup together, and you just add a little bit of food coloring to balance it out. But it just tastes like sugar syrup,
Okay.
But it moves really nicely and has that deep richness to it. So it's really just ice cream topping. Is all it is.
Yeah. You ice cream topped a shibari model. I love it.
Oh, it was pretty hot. But yeah, look, as far as that, our house literally had a meeting all about that. What is the new version of our mission statement, and what do we stand for, and what do we want to achieve? And a lot of it is around supporting our artistic projects, and a lot of our artistic projects speak to the identity or experience as vampire. Things that aren't just based around club nights necessarily, but making sure we have other opportunities to create space that's welcoming. So we will be restarting the Vampire Lounge, which is actually where the Vampire Ball began as a Vampire Lounge originally, which was a pop-up space. It was happening regularly at a nightclub down here, but setting up some vampire lounges that are open for public to come and attend and meet the vampires and learn a little bit about community, and particularly for those that are newly awakened or not sure what's going on, they can listen and learn a little bit and have an opportunity to talk with vampires and demystify some of the stuff around it. So that's sort of the next stages of what it is. World dominance isn't in my 5-year calendar plan, but we'll see. But I would love for the ball to grow. I would love to have more international community connect and crossover with that. I can announce here, I'm really honoured that Father Sebastian and Joy Felicity are actually flying to Australia to attend this year's Vampire Ball, which is really, really lovely. And that's not in a business commercial sense by any means. It's simply just Father Sebastian has been a wonderful support for me and a good friend of mine for a long time. I'm not a member of Sabretooth, and we do things quite differently. We just have a wonderful love and appreciation and respect for each other. And yeah, he's deciding to come on out and explore Australia. So I'm really, really happy that he's coming to the ball. But I'm friends with a lot of members of community, then some of them don't necessarily get along, and that's okay. It's their business. It's not mine. It's not my journey. I stick to what's relevant to me and with the people I'm engaging with. I don't get caught up in politics. I've lasted over 25 years in vampire community by not getting caught up in politics. I have opinions, though, but I'll express them directly. And if people ask me directly and have conversations with me, that's how I engage. Yeah, I have no time for the rest of it, the drama. So yeah, I'm really blessed to have made a number of wonderful friends with members of community, mostly in America, some elsewhere. But yeah, it's really, really lovely to sort of keep those connections and find how our communities, though our worlds are so far apart and quite different, where we cross over and where we can learn from each other and what we can teach each other and how we can support each other in these various spaces. You know, for me to travel on my own as much as I do in these different environments, to be held and welcomed and honestly, authentically listened to and supported by community has meant the world to me. And whether it be Gotham or House of Marley, things like that, there's been a lot of beautiful moments, particularly New Orleans in 2023 Halloween. There was a whole variety of different houses and elders that all came together, and a lot of them put their stuff aside and just were authentically there to connect and share. And I was openly welcomed into that space as I was launching House of Agrios. And that meant a lot. That was so incredibly special to me. So staying true to those people and authentic relationships and real friendships above and beyond ego and drama is what matters to me most. And yeah, seeing that growing community, I think, is healthy.
I think the community is going towards a really good direction. At least like within the last few years, I can see the stark difference there has been versus before, when we were talking about the 2000s versus now. I think post-COVID, people realize that we need to come together. Mm-hmm. And I always say that COVID is the best and worst thing that's happened to me, because the quarantine and everything, because I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about how people work. Just kind of watching as things have evolved and changed so much in the last few years. I think people were tired of fighting. And I think that's really important that they learned that, because we all had to come together during that time. Like, we had to spend time with we were forced to spend time with each other online. The people we hated the most all came together. And I think it's really special that people are starting to realize, okay, let's do something bigger here. So I think that the community has grown. I think it's changing a lot. I think that there's still a lot of chaos, but it's not the same drama that it was before, and that feels really good. I think it's also great that you're almost like a vampire emissary, because you have traveled into these other spaces that, like, I've visited a few spaces. Like, when I lived in Los Angeles, there were a lot of people that were traveling in and out of that community, and it was interesting to see how people were received and going to like public events and things like that versus what you're telling me. I think it's really cool that you have gone and visited all these houses and people are welcoming to you, but that's important because they don't have that sort of external person to come in and be like, hey, what's going on? How are you guys doing? I'd like to learn from you. It's a positive force on those houses that are kind of closed off.
Yeah. It again, it is that there is that change, and I to echo your sentiment there, we learnt a lot through that forced united experience of going, oh, hold on, we really are all in this together, aren't we? And some swords got laid by the side, and I'm not dismissing people's beefs. There's authentic reasons people are very pissed off at each other. I get that. Does that mean I need to be pissed off with both of them? Not necessarily. So I don't buy into that. It's, if my relationship with you is dependent on my loyalty to your grudge or the fact that someone wronged you in a certain way, we've got to have a deeper discussion about what this is. I'm an incredibly loyal person, and I will stand up for what I believe is right, definitely. And if something is involving me or about me or directly associated with my world, then yeah, of course I'll get involved right away, and I'll have a very clear conversation, and we'll either come out of it hugging or hating, and that's okay. We can walk away. And I don't have to be everyone's best friend. I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I just ask that relationships are authentic, and I expect that people just approach with humility and an openness and a willingness to let people grow, let people change, let people evolve, let people learn, give people opportunity to learn from their mistakes. None of us can be throwing stones in this glass house, I'm sure. And particularly in vampire community, we've all got history. And that, I'm not saying that to excuse certain behaviors. There's lines, and yeah. So
I mean, the things that I learned,
unless it involves me, I don't want it. I don't drag me into your beef. Like, share your drama. Fuck, I'm always here for the tea. I fucking love the popcorn of it. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't cock an eyebrow for without practice. But in all honesty, my lips are sealed on so many secrets because they're not mine. And
I feel like we're very similar people in that. Like, a lot of what you just described is how I am too. These like as I've gotten older, I'm like, I don't need to involve myself in any of that. Like, I'm good. You did mention that people do change and grow from their original, like, early opinions and things, and I think that's actually really important to also mention in the vampire community, as a lot of things that I learned very, very, very long ago, and the things that I had done and the beef that I had, or things that happened with people that I was involved with, I have also grown. I've also become a bigger person, and I've let a lot of that shit go. But a lot of people don't let shit go. They go, well, you did this thing 20 years ago and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, but like, we're people. We learn from our mistakes. We move on and we grow. Going back to what you said earlier, if you have all of this pent up anger over something that happened 20 years ago, there's a bigger problem than that thing that happened 20 years ago. The bigger problem is you in not letting those things go. And I think that's really important to also note, because a lot of the drama that's still there is stuff that people just don't let go of. Like, let it go. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Also, that was like the dawn of the internet. Like, things are way different now. Like, resources are so much better. We've got so many more publications. We had like 5 resources back in the day. Like, it's not all going to be the same. It's all going to be different, especially now that we're global. We're worldwide. Like, we are now talking to each other, and I think that's important to just note, because people don't let things go.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think I had frosted tips 20 years ago, and I can forgive and forget that and move on. I'm not the same person. So, like, fuck, there's so many things that we regret, and I'm sorry I forced that vision upon people. But, like, we make mistakes. It's okay. But again, it's all about evolving and growing. And if we stop learning, if we stop evolving, if we stop challenging ourselves and reassessing what we believe to be true, then we die. We don't continue. And that's individual, that's metaphorical, that's very true physically, but also as community more than anything. So so being open to that, I think is key. And yeah, well, look, we're seeing it, and I'm excited. There was a period of time. Obviously, I stepped away a lot from community because I was just overwhelmed, and it was toxic and was hideous. But it was teething. It was teething. Period. And we were building identifiers, and because we're already other, the want and need to solidify what that other is in a safe, no, this is what it is, became so needed out of desperation and fear, and in doing that, we hurt ourselves, and that was necessary. It was teething. It was a process where we got hard identifiers. Have we since unpacked a lot of those understandings or those concepts? Some of them, yeah. Some of them are still being written in new books the exact same way, which is hilarious. But overall, generally, there's more nuance and careful analysis and careful reflection. And also, we've got more language around it now. We've got terminology to better identify and express those things. And for me, how I identify as vampire, I'm like a tick list of a bunch of them. Like, it's I have to sit in this category. It's like, no, but I do that, and I do that, and I do that. And so yeah, there's different ways of approaching it. And even with my own house, as I mentioned earlier, about having different elders in the house, is that they have different experiences and different identifiers in a way to me. If we put ourselves in a box with a label, but we don't. But I like the idea of the innate vampire, because my aspect comes through not as an archetype that I put on, but rather something that comes out and expresses itself and reflects in what someone would call the archetype. So it's a different approach of a similar concept, but quite different. So my expression is what we call innate vampire, where others like Satanists or Left Hand Path will often do archetype version. And I don't begrudge that or say that's any less a vampire than me.
Just their version.
Yeah, their expression, their identity, what echoes for them. And we're allowed to have these conversations now. Where back in the day, we literally had, real vampires, no sigh, no and things like that. Like,
none of those allowed.
Saying no sigh,
Keep out.
No role players.
No role players.
God forbid any form of lifestyle come into vampires. But we're sitting here with fangs, like.
Yeah, I mean,
love it.
Look, it's fun, okay?
Yeah.
No, I think it's actually I'm glad that you actually mentioned.
We take ourselves very seriously
here.
We're
very seriously on this. We're very serious people on this podcast. 100%. Everyone that I have interviewed has been a very serious person. Actually, going. I'm glad that you mentioned the role playing aspect. A lot of back in the day, they had Vampire the Masquerade. It was very prevalent, and there was a lot of crossover. I actually had a conversation on one of my other podcasts. Or one of my other episodes with Michelle Belanger. They had mentioned that they had written some role-playing games, like some, and on top of that, there was also role-playing going on, and then the crossover was really rough back in the day with the two. Like, you couldn't be a gamer but also be in the vampire community, because that was like a no-no, because like then you were just a LARPer. You know what I mean? Like, there was... Going back to the categorizing everything, thankfully, we have all grown past that and can do the fun things that we want to do and write, games and things now. I feel like the crossover, there's probably like a Venn diagram somewhere. There, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much crossover. Like the goth with the gaming and the, the vampire. Yeah. It's just all its own thing at some point. But I feel like we're all very similar in like the things that we enjoy, because the things that we enjoy tend to be a little bit more fun or lighthearted or even role play aspect type stuff. Going to a goth club and dressing up and wearing fangs and contacts is just one aspect of the lifestyle, and that's
Completely.
not everybody does that.
Yeah,
it's just like a couple of
exactly.
like it. You know, some people really enjoy that. Other people, they live in solitary situations and they don't do all that stuff. So a lot of them do.
Yeah, look, it's funny. I feel a lot of that pushback, particularly against role players and things like that, was we're trying to be taken seriously, so stop messing around, or we're not that fantasy people. It's like, yeah, no, we're not. We're allowed to enjoy the fantasy. But I think a lot of it in those early days was because we're trying to establish something and teach people about something very real here. So stop bringing in your fantasy world into it. And I agree with don't bring that into it. Yeah. I get that. But a lot of early days of vampire community, if you look at, the American vampire community, I shouldn't say vampire community as a whole, because unfortunately I get annoyed when I hear a lot of particularly North Americans talk about the vampire community as no, you mean America, or you mean the USA specifically is what you mean. But anyway, when you look at Gotham and things like that, a lot of origins, they began in role-play gatherings and things like that. And I've heard Michelle mention they've talked about themselves going to role play events and things like that, and it was great because you could, the vampires pretending to be humans, pretending to be vampires, how avant-garde. That whole concept was real. It was it was a place to put on that extra mask and then start to sniff around to go, well, hold on, what brings you here?
Right. Here is maybe more than just a LARPer or a role player.
Yeah, what are you getting out of this experience? What need do you have to be here? Is it just as character expression, or is it self-expression?
Right.
And that's where a lot of communities started to find each other. And I think we need to be careful not to get stuck in the old ways of thinking about role-play community, because back then we were fighting for authenticity.
Yeah.
Now we understand why, but also we don't need to anymore. And so many of us are tied up in not tied up, sorry, blend our worlds of communicating with each other through roleplay language. Like literally the first Black Veils that was written was literally just a rehash of Vampire Masquerade laws. And it's evolved since. Just because it began from that doesn't, diminish it.
Some things have to start somewhere. And ideas have to start somewhere. But, I mean, I'm not going to just pull bylaws, out of nothing. Like, I totally understand. I get it. A lot of, when I go into the vampire community type message boards and stuff, a lot of people still, like, have hangups about that. And I'm like, well, where do you expect this was supposed to start? Like, I don't quite understand why we were so upset. I mean, yes, I do get it, but everything starts from something, or starts, so it's.
And they influenced each other. The vampire community influenced the writings of Vampire Masquerade massively.
Yeah.
So they fed each other quite literally in that way. So it's the chicken or the egg process with that. And let's, this hyper fear to separate and other is just bullshit. And yeah.
I have a question for you.
Mm.
Since we're now talking about like literature and things like that, how did you feel about the new Nosferatu? Did you see it? Okay. What'd you think? I haven't gotten to ask anybody. I haven't gotten to talk to anybody about it yet.
Yeah. Robert Eggers is one of my favorite directors. His hand.
I love The Lighthouse.
Love The Lighthouse. Yeah. The Witch, The Lighthouse are two of my favorite films. And He works very well with I forget the name of the cinematographer, but the hand he has with his team is phenomenal. But more so, his vision of being able to find the authentic fairy tale underneath all of these stories, to find that true gothic horror of it all and make it timeless, which is what fairy tales are. They are timeless. And he finds that. So within The Witch, and the level of research and authenticity in that, right from costuming to language to accents, is mind-blowing. And his personal relationship with Nosferatu is really, really quite special. Like, this was the film he always wanted to make, kind of thing. So, and you can see it. You can see the love that's in it, the passion, the research is beyond belief. As far as like, it's not the same Nosferatu, and it's not meant to be.
Nosferatu was a ripoff of Dracula.
Exactly. So what he was able to do was find, Nosferatu ripped off Dracula, yes. But what it was doing was Nosferatu actually found the fairy tale in it. So he actually went back to that origin of it. So that's why it was Nosferatu, not Dracula, and not the Nosferatu that we know, which is really just a soft Dracula in disguise. So I loved his originality. I loved that he brought new elements to it, but wrote them authentically, gave them a real world to live in, rather than just tack on something that was just an aesthetic choice or things like that. Though that prosthetic penis may have just been an aesthetic choice. I don't know. No, sorry, no spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it.
I feel like everyone's seen the Nicholas Hoult like holding up the frame of the prosthetic at some point. I feel like that's made the rounds. Everybody should have seen that already. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go see what Robert Eggers gifted to Nicholas Hoult. That's all you got to look up.
But his folklore, his connection and what it brought into it of folklore vampires, like right at that moment where he's surrounded by the Romany people, he wakes up in the dream state at night and sees the naked virgin on the back of a white stallion being led into the graveyard, which is classic, traditional, historical folklore technique for finding vampires and hunting vampires. So just those moments were so special, and we never had that that. Like we Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's, he layered in so many symbols, and he took from folklore and then just a whole bunch of fabulous aesthetics, and it's a fever dream of a film, and really in its own way it's perfection and also horrific, but I love it. Eggers was able to also pull from authentic history and set it more so in a real world space, which is what he does so beautifully.
It felt right. Like if you know even just the slightest thing about vampires, what he did was he really kind of showed you. He didn't just show you Nosferatu. He showed you all of the ways in which they were trying to find him, in which they lived around him, in which he lived. Like, they showed you all of that. If you pay attention, there are very interesting things that he really did his best to create this world. And I think I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and just, taking from that true folkloric vampire. He's not... it's far removed from the Byron era vampire that's influenced so much of us since, and so to have a story being told from that perspective and that version that sits in history is really cool, and that beautiful blurring of the lines between, this was very real, and hold on, where does this magic come in? Where does this mystery come in? So setting it in that real world state is really clever. And again, like The Witch, he did the same thing. Took very traditional practices of witchcraft, and also fears of the culture and the overlays of
he did a very
religion at the time.
similar thing in Northman as well.
Yeah.
If I don't know how much you know about like Viking lore and things, but like very little things, like for example, there's a scene where the Valkyrie is like shouting at the camera. The Valkyrie has cuts in her teeth, like just little things like that, where you're like, this is something that they did, and Eggers did his research and offered that to us and gave people. A lot of people don't realize that these are things, little things that they did back then that he fantasized and made real and brought to light. But I loved Northman as well. It's a very good. Plus, I think he's just kind of ticking off the Skarsgård list at this point.
I think so, yeah.
You know,
how many Skarsgårds are left?
I don't know, like 3, 4. I don't know. I lost count.
Yeah, but Willem Dafoe is a phenomenal actor, and he is built for that gothic horror so beautifully. And part of my personal world is nautical horror. Is like that's my sweet spot.
Really?
I'm a vampire at heart.
I love Western vampire, like vampire westerns. I want more. We don't get enough. Like, and everyone that I get is just like, oh.
we're about to have The Sinners come out.
What is that?
Michael B. Jordan.
Oh yeah.
That not Western, but it's set during Prohibition era, and so that's going to bring some really interesting, cool aesthetics. But yeah, obviously, Near Dark was the first true Western vampire film. Catherine Bigelow directed that. Genius, amazing. So yeah, I love the grittiness of that. I role play language. I'm a Toreador through and through. Like, I don't excuse it, but I have a very brouhaha heart at the end of the day.
Right.
Like my pretty is okay to be in a messy state.
I love that. I love that I knew exactly what you were talking about. I'm a gangrel.
Okay.
So yeah, I get you. I'm on that level. I understand. I hope everybody knows.
You're on it. Yeah. See, global language.
Yeah,
let's bring us together. The importance. But yeah, the Lighthouse for me was that nautical horror because it was an unfinished work by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just that grittiness, and Willem Dafoe just like chewed the scenery down in that performance. Like
his on-screen chemistry with Pattinson is just chef's kiss. The two of them work off of each other so well. I would love to see them in another film just doing crazy things together.
100%.
So they were amazing together. Anyway, I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about Eggers. I love it. I haven't got to talk about it on the show yet, so I'm excited about it. I actually need to go pick up the Blu-ray because I want to go see the extended cut. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh yeah.
So I think I got to do that at some point. Well, thank you for everything. What do you have, I guess, projects coming up past the Vampire Ball? Anything?
Ooh. There's things in the works, but not locked in as yet. As I said, we literally just last weekend had a come together of our house to start to plan some things out. There's individual projects within the house, because we're a house of artists, so musicians and dancers and club owners and things like that. So there's multiple things. I'm never just doing one thing at any time anyway. But for me, the focus is this ball at the moment. It's 2 months away, so it's all consuming. And then hopefully I'll be able to look at some travel again. And I'm continuing my writing and would like to look at relaunching some of my workshops in a different form. So yeah, there's some things that are on the cusp.
land?
Pardon?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I said you have a lot of entertainers for this ball. You've got a lot. You've got like a big list here. This is going to be really cool. I wish I could go. I hope to see. I hope to see some great photos and videos, though. Like that is going to be really exciting. Well, congratulations on year 2. Or coming up on year 2. That's exciting. Thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you?
Where do they find me? Instagram is easy. So my own Instagram, Rum and Blood, is again vampire nautical
vampire. Combo. I love it.
But otherwise, the Vampire Ball is the Carpe Noctem Vampire Ball. So you can find everything there. You can also the House of Agrios. Look up House of Agrios, and you'll find us there. Otherwise, the Hallowed Grounds link. Yeah, you'll have all my links, but but I respond generally on Instagram through Messenger. So if there's people that want to reach out to me directly, Rum and Blood is the best one. If it's anything to do with the ball or questions about the ball, ask on that one. But yeah, I'm around. So yeah.
Well, thank you for coming by the show today. I appreciate it. I know you are in the future. We have like almost a day time difference between you and me. That's wild.
Yeah, I think it's coming up to like 1:30 or something like that here in the afternoon on Saturday.
Yeah,
so,
I'm 9 p.m. on a Friday. So it's a pretty big difference. Yeah. So nobody thinks about that.
Yeah, my work world is global as well, so I'm in all different time zones and travel a lot. So it's you get used to being a timey-wimey vampire.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Buck. I appreciate you. And everybody that is listening, you can find all of Buck's links in the descriptions on Spotify, YouTube. We're on Audible. All that stuff's on there. So thank you all so much for joining me for the episode. And I will see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.